So I'm in ToonSquid 2 now, which comes with some amazing new updates and plenty of effects for you to add, which can really benefit your animation, and you can really have some fun with it. So I'm in the effects tool, and you've got Gaussian blur, adjustments, pixelate, chroma key, sharpness, halftone, and it goes on. But the one I'm particularly interested in today is bones, mesh, and warping, because I want to be able to show you how to use those effects effectively, to coin a phrase. So I tend to make characters out of another program because I like making vector characters out of simple shapes and different kind of textures from the shapes. So I've got a raft of these characters which I've made in another program. But now I want to be able to put them into ToonSquid to animate them. So in this program I can basically export them as SVGs here with transparent background. And then you'll see what you can do in ToonSquid. And the one thing you can do now in ToonSquid is you can import SVG symbols. And so here you can see a character that I brought in. You can see I've got the Hulk character. And to make it easier to manage, I've imported it in as an SVG, but in the original program I separated them out. And then, if I show you what I did, I've literally copied all the different layers, because you can see in the original layers that they are just shapes. And all sorts of shapes. So sometimes I even put them in groups in the vector programs, but basically when you bring it into ToonSquid, it brings it in as individual shapes rather than the groups that they're in. So if I was to put it into, I don't know, Affinity Vector or Illustrator, it would save the groups, but in ToonSquid it doesn't, it just brings them in as shapes. So I've basically gone through and copied each component. And you'll see I've only got one leg and one arm, because basically I can duplicate them and just change them over so that one right one becomes a left one and vice versa. So if I show you the Hulk character in its entirety, I've now got this set up, and basically they're set up in a group. Now this is important. I've still got the original shapes in here like this. But I've put them into different layers, but I've put them within a group, which is important when you're doing bones work, because otherwise it'll just deform the whole shape when you put the bones on and not the individual layers. So let's have a look at it and see what you can do first of all. So if I now add the bones tool, which you can see, let me just take that off and do it again. So if I add bones, which is here, I now have these two little tools, which you'll see on the left hand side. One is for creating the bones and one is for manipulating the bones, so that as I go across the timeline, I can individually keyframe the properties of those bones. So let's take the bone, which is the plus one rather, and let's start doing it. So let's just pinch in here, and I'm going to start from the torso, and I'm just going to move up like this. And it's important to note that when you're first drawing a bone, they become blue, and you want to keep the hierarchy. You'll see on the right hand side there's something called hierarchy, and basically you can't see it at the moment, but when I start adding bones, you want them to be connected in such a way that the arms are together, the legs are together, but it's based on, say, like the stomach, so that basically when you're moving it all together, you can individually move the arms, or you can move the body and arms, sorry. And so let's see, but when it's blue, and I then add another bone, and I add another bone here, you'll see that if I go back to the bone hierarchy, yes, they're all doing that. They're all in the hierarchy, one underneath another. So each of these will be affected by one another. But what that means is that when I eventually use the first bone, it should move all the elements that are connected to it in some way. But you'll see now that the deselected ones are yellow. What I want to do to create the hierarchy for the next bones, which is my arm bones, is literally to tap on the torso bone, because I want it to be connected to the torso, and then draw up to the body shoulder there. And then I want to keep the arms connected to that shoulder for this left arm here. So I'm just going to draw across there, and you can see there that it's starting to build up a map of the bones. Right, we'll just leave it there for the moment just to show you what can happen with all the bones. So If I start moving them now, like this, I just select one with my tool that's got the arrow, and you'll see that it's just pivoting on the torso from the lower blue circle here. You can see on his sort of trouser area. Back there, if I just move the arm there, it's got some weird deforming going on. And if I move that one, it doesn't look quite right at the moment. So let's just go back to the default. What I would tend to do, and let's see, did I do a head? I don't think I did a head, did I? So let's go, just draw a head, which comes off that one. And then, yeah, it's got that weird kind of deforming going on. So it's kind of moving it, but not in a way I want it to. So what you can do is you can just literally bind it to the different shapes. But I've got a problem immediately that because I've got all my different shapes here, it's trying to grab the individual shapes here to bind the bones to. I want to bind it to the head as a whole, or the body as a whole, or the right leg, etc., etc. So what I'm going to do is just go back into the original one and just take it out a minute. I'm just going to take my bones tool out a minute, because what I'm going to do now is if I put a bone on the head without binding it to the head, it kind of gets that squashy effect which we just saw earlier. But what you can do is I can add a warp effect, and you can see it's in the section that says rigging. There it is, like that. And what I can do now is when I draw a bone around that, it's going to map it to that warp. And so there's quite a lot of points it can map it to, and it also should bind it to the head layer, and you'll see that in a minute. I can do a little bit of a cheat now. If I take the warp and I copy it, I can then go into body, just click on effects and paste it. And I can go through and do the same for each of the others, and you'll see that they are starting to build up warp meshes, if you like, for each one. And there we go. And there we go, paste for the final one. So now I've got warps on all of them, but I still want to add the actual bones tool on the main Hulk group. And I'm just going to show you again that little thing we did just to show you the body and the arm, just to see what happens now. So if I draw a bone up from the torso, up to the neck, up to the head, I've connected all those bones together. Just going to tap out of there because I want to connect the arm and shoulder to the main torso. So I select the bone, which you can see here is now in blue. And then I draw up there. And then anything in blue will then connect to the other ones in the hierarchy. So now I can just draw, say, the arm there and the arm there. Now, if I try moving this again, instantly I've got this strange looking distortion going on. So what I want to do is just tap on each bone, and it brings up a dialog box which has got edit bone binding. And I want to tap on that and then just tap into, now you can see before it was saying shapes, now it's saying group body. So that's what I want to do, bind to the bone. And I'm just going to go through and that one's the head, isn't it? So let's bind that one and then bind that one to the body. And the shoulder one, because I want the arm to move from this sort of corner, I'm just going to bind this one here to the body. And then these two here to the arm. And you'll see it's showing group left arm, group body, group head, etc. Let's go into that group left arm. So now I've got all these bound to their different parts. So let's just have a look when I use this tool here again. The only reason it's doing that is because I haven't connected the right arm at the moment. And if I do the head, it's not deforming it in the way it was before. And also if I now move the arm, yeah, you can see that it's moving from the shoulder joint. And if I move the lower arm on the hand, it kind of meshes. It's taking that warp and giving it that sort of nice liquidy type movement. So now let's go through and just do all the other bones just to demonstrate how it's all going to look in its entirety. And I'm just going to keep the feet separate at the moment, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I started up here, so let's go through and just bind them. Bind to body, and that's going to be bind to the arm, and that's going to be again bind to the arm. And then with the legs, I just want to be able to bind to the different legs. That's the left leg, and it's just binding to the group name now as opposed to individual shapes in the groups. And I can bind again to the right leg, and then bind again to the right leg on that one as well. If I take this bone on the arm, and let's just add a keyframe there, for instance, and then I think I've got it an automatic keyframe, so it should just automatically keyframe where I want it. Let's leave it up there for a minute, and then you'll see, yep, it's got that movement. And if I show you the actual keyframes, just moving it in there. And then if I start with that one, and then go to that other keyframe, and then on this other bone, I can just, yep, like that. It's again got that liquidy feel, and you can see it's almost like a wave. If I was to loop that, I could have a wave going on like that. So let's just get rid of those a minute. And the same with the legs. So if I go onto the legs, I'm not going to keyframe it at the moment, I was just going to show you. Yep, it's moving. Okay, and then on the right hand leg, do the same. And again, I can squish it around however much I want, which may be fine if I just want to have some sort of basic action going. But you'll see that in the demo that Key1, the developer, supplied, he had like a stick man and he had it kicking, and that would be tricky to do using this because it meshes around in a sort of squidgy way. But what you can do is I can just almost like clamp the whole character down, because again, if I take this and I wanted to say have it bouncing on the spot, it's just moving it up and down, but there's nothing to sort of pivot it on to hold it in place, because I want basically the upper body to squidge down to give it sort of like a bouncy feel. And the way I can do that is I can just draw some independent IK bones so that the legs can latch onto those, and you literally just don't have it in the hierarchy. So I've got all the bones in yellow, and then I'm just going to draw on there, click off, and then draw in here. And I'm going to call it something like, I don't know, right leg IK target, something silly like that. And I don't want it to have really any strength, and I want it to be independent rotating. And then, so I've got that set up, and if I look at the hierarchy, you'll see that I've got my targets which are outside of the main hierarchy. They're like the equivalent of the torso effectively, but there's nothing coming onto them. But I want to be able to latch so that I can clamp down the legs by linking the last bone in each leg and to that particular IK target, so it holds it in place really, and I can move it just using the IK target rather than the individual bones in the leg, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So if I click on the right leg, and it's called B13, but I can go through and just look at the IK targets and the property, and let's call that right leg there, target, and then if I click on the other one, the left leg, and I can do the targets there. And what that means now, it looks a bit deformed at the moment, but I can basically stretch this out, and I'm controlling it now. Oops. You have to sort of work with it. I'm controlling it now on the IK, and that means I can, yeah, you can see there, I could potentially kick like that and bring it down again. And the same one here, I could just bring it in a bit. If I'm controlling these here, it just does some strange effects. So I tend to control it if I'm keyframing on the IK targets. Also, if I'm then moving the body, I can, if I get it right, probably done this too quickly, but I can get it bouncing, if you like, on the spot. I might have to move those IK targets out a bit to get that working properly. And then I can start basically keyframing each of those bones. So I could start with the head, for instance, and I think it's got an automatic keyframe on the first frame, and then literally just do it like that, and then maybe that. And you can see here I've got a strange thing going on. Same with the arms. I think I showed that earlier. Oh, you just see what I did there. I clicked my pen by accident and it's turned off the effects. You can turn it on or off at any time just to see it as it was. Let's turn it back on. Let's go to bones there, selecting the tool there. And I'm just going to move this and just move it with the head. Oops. You've got different properties in the bones: position, rotation, length, and it depends on how you move it, which properties are affected. I kind of just really want the rotation at the moment, and maybe possibly the length or the positioning, so that I can just bring it in a bit, and then I'm going to go back and get the other tool, the lower bone near the hand, and just move this. Oops, I don't want to move it yet, so I want to move it to the other one, and I can get more precision by looking at just clicking on this little keyframe bar, and if I want to know where the other one is, I can just find it there and just go there, and then I've got the hand, and you got this sort of acknowledgement that he's sort of waving at you, so there you go. And then just again to see where that's coming in or where it finishes, and then maybe bring the hand bones down as well. And then just also moving out a bit like that. So yeah, it's going quite fast now, but you get the idea. There you go, and he's waving. Hello, he says. So yeah, that's basically how you do the bones on the kind of SVG layers that I've got. One thing I also wanted to demonstrate to you as well is that I've now set up the rigging on symbols. Now symbols are library items, so you can see here I've got the individual Hulk SVG, but then I've also separated them into body, head, arm, leg, and again I only need one arm and leg because I could just duplicate them. So if I look at arm and edit it in its original state, it's just the arm, and you can see here it's still made of all the shapes, but I've now put it in the library rather than just have it as a layer in the group with all the shapes on. So if I go back to scene 1, you can see here in the drawing layers, I've still got the group, but this time they're all symbols. So basically I've rigged them so that they're now bound to each of the different layers. So if I take this one for instance and I reset it and just edit it, I can just do body. So I've done that for each of them. But so the problem is now that if I try and manipulate them, I can do it on the body, but if I try to do it on some of the bones, I'm not getting anything. You see, before when we were doing the arm, we were getting a nice liquidy mesh effect. Same with the head, I'm not getting any of the effects there. So again, what you need to do is I'm just going to go through and just demonstrate. So if I take off the bones, and I'm just going to do it on a few of them, and I'm just going to add the same as before. If we add the warp, for instance, and I just copy it, just go through onto the body. I'm only going to do it for a few just to demonstrate it, and we'll just do it the left arm. Paste, and you can see now we've got the mesh warping effect on each of these different symbols. If I tap on the warp, you can see it more clearly, and again, there we go. And if I now go to the Hulk symbols and add in, let's say, bones. If I now add in the bones using the Bones Plus tool, just quickly to show you what I'm going to do. So just from the torso up to the neck, up to the head, click on the torso, so I get the hierarchy of the shoulder and the arm in the right place. Shoulder, arm, arm. Just going to do it for that, just to show you what's going to happen. And then I'm just going to tap on each of them, bind them to the different symbols. And now let's go through and see if I can move them. So again, it's moving the body, but not the right arm because I'm not connected it to it, but I can move them individually like this. And also let's look at the arm. So although I can move it there, we were moving it like that before, I can now, yes, move the arm again. So there's a little tip there that basically if you do symbols, you still need to add in, even though you haven't got all the different shapes in the symbols because they're in the library and they're still identifying as their own layer, So you'd think you'd be able to bind it straight to the layer and it would do it, but you do need to add something because the bones effect won't really work on it unless you've got a mesh or a warp effect. So there you go. And then I can again just go into say like the head and just keyframe it. So to start there, just there, go a little bit beyond there, and now let's keyframe the head. And the same with the arm. Let's just move a little bit and just move it up towards the head, and maybe just down again like that, and then go to the other bone, just move a touch, and then maybe to wave there like that, and then as it comes down just like that. So now when I'm doing it, there we go, he's waving again, and all good. So there's various ways you can do it, and the only exception I would say is if you rasterize them all. So let's try that. So let's take off the bones and let's make these symbols into their own actual layers by rasterizing them. So I'm just clicking on this. So these are now sort of pixel layers, but also on those ones I've got effects on, so the heads. Let's take off the warp now, because I shouldn't need this now. Take off the warp. It was left on, wasn't it? Take off the warp. So I've got no effects on those. I've got nothing on it at the moment. So if I add in the bones tool on these rasterized layers, so basically all the different layers within the group are now rasterized, and I just do the same thing again just for the torso with the bones tool, and then I'll just bind them each. This is just to show you what you can do with just a few bones to demonstration. Now I haven't got any warping effects on the head or the body or the left arm, the ones I'm going to concentrate on. And then if I click on bones, you can see the bones again. And again, if I start moving them, again, it's moving properly this time. So the head is not deformed, the body's not deformed, the arm is moving up, and the hand is doing the mesh thing, but I don't need the actual warp or mesh on the on the rasterized pixel layers, because they just work by themselves. So in summary, on your raster layers, you can just get away without having any extra effects. And then when you put the bones tool on the group that those layers are in, you've got the ability to move the individual parts of the bones, say like this, on the arm, on the torso, on the head, and they're not deformed, but they do what you'd expect them to do from bones. Whereas in the SVG, which has got lots of layers, you do need to go and put that extra step in by putting the warp or the mesh tool on individual layers within the group. And the same for symbols, otherwise the symbols won't work. But that just gives you a few ideas and a few ways of playing with it. And I think you'll agree, you'll have so much fun with it, and it's really, once you get the hang of it, not that hard to set up. So have fun animating. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.